The dust swirled around her boots as Penelope Ellis pulled her horse to a stop in front of the weathered ranch house. Her throat parched, and her sense of direction completely shattered somewhere between the last creek crossing and the endless expanse of Nevada territory that all looked exactly the same. She had been riding for 3 days straight from Carson City, clutching a letter that promised her a teaching position in a town called Winnemucca. But the map she had purchased turned out to be less accurate than the smooth-talking merchant had assured her it would be. Now, as the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on this September day in 1882, she found herself completely lost with only a few swallows of warm water left in her canteen, and a horse that looked just as exhausted as she felt. The ranch stretched out before her, modest but well-maintained, with a barn that had seen better days and a corral where several horses milled about in the shade. Penelope dismounted, her legs wobbling slightly from the long ride, and approached the front door with as much dignity as she could muster given that she was covered in trail dust and sweat. She raised her hand and knocked 3 times, the sound echoing in the quiet afternoon air that was broken only by the occasional call of a crow somewhere in the distance. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then she heard footsteps, heavy and measured, approaching from inside. The door swung open to reveal a man who immediately made her forget every polite greeting she had rehearsed in her head during the walk from her horse to his porch. He stood well over 6 feet tall, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of whiskey in candlelight. His face was sun-bronzed and angular, with a strong jaw shadowed by a day or two of stubble, and he wore a simple work shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle. He looked to be somewhere in his mid-20s, perhaps 26 or 27, and there was a wariness in his expression that suggested he did not get many visitors out here. "Can I help you, miss?" His voice was deep and rough, like gravel rolling in a stream, but not unkind. Penelope cleared her throat, suddenly very aware of how disheveled she must look. "I apologize for the intrusion, sir. I am afraid I am quite lost. I am trying to reach Winnemucca, but I seem to have taken a wrong turn somewhere back near what I think was the Toyabe Range, though honestly at this point I could not say for certain where I am at all." Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of concern replacing the initial guardedness. "Winnemucca. Miss, you are about 70 miles off course. You are currently standing on my ranch about 15 miles south of Tonopah, which means you somehow managed to head southeast when you should have been going north." Her heart sank like a stone thrown into a well. 70 miles. That was at least another 3 or 4 days of riding, and that was assuming she could even find her way without getting more lost. "Oh dear, that is quite unfortunate." "That is one way to put it," he said, and she thought she detected the faintest hint of amusement in his tone. "When did you last eat or drink anything?" "This morning. I had some jerky and the last of my water about 2 hours ago." He studied her for a moment longer, then stepped back from the doorway. "Come inside. You and your horse both need rest and water before you go anywhere else." "I am Zachary Brennan, and this is my ranch such as it is." "Penelope Ellis," she replied, following him inside to a surprisingly neat interior. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace at one end and a sturdy wooden table with mismatched chairs in the center. Everything was clean and organized, which was not what she had expected from a bachelor cowboy living alone in the middle of nowhere. Zachary gestured to one of the chairs. "Sit. I will get you some water and then tend to your horse. What is her name?" "Daisy, and I can help with her." "I do not want to impose more than I already have." "You are not imposing, Miss Ellis, and you look like you are about to fall over. Drink this." He handed her a tin cup filled with cool water from a pitcher that must have been kept in a root cellar or springhouse. She drank gratefully, the water soothing her parched throat. While she recovered, Zachary went outside to care for Daisy. Penelope took the opportunity to study her surroundings more carefully. The house was small but comfortable, with handmade curtains on the windows and a bookshelf in one corner that held a surprising collection of volumes. She recognized some Shakespeare, several dime novels, and what looked like technical manuals on ranching and animal husbandry. There was a photograph on the mantel of a stern-looking couple, probably his parents, and a rifle mounted on the wall above the door. When Zachary returned 20 minutes later, he found her examining his bookshelf with undisguised curiosity. "Your horse is settled in the barn with fresh water and hay. She will be fine after a good rest." "You read Shakespeare?" Penelope asked, unable to contain her surprise. A hint of defensiveness crept into his expression. "Is that so hard to believe?" "No, I apologize. That was rude of me. It is just unexpected to find another reader out here. Most people I have encountered on my journey seem to think books were only good for starting fires." His posture relaxed slightly. "My mother was a school teacher back in Missouri. She made sure I could read and write properly before she died. Said ignorance was a choice, not a circumstance." There was a sadness in his voice that told Penelope this was not a recent loss, but one that still carried weight. "She sounds like she was a wise woman. I am a teacher myself, or I will be once I finally reach Winnemucca. I am supposed to start at the schoolhouse there in 2 weeks." Zachary moved to the stove and began preparing something, his movements efficient and practiced. "You will not make it in 2 weeks, not if you rest properly first. That horse of yours needs at least a day or two before she should be ridden hard again, and honestly, you look like you could use the same." Penelope bristled slightly at his assessment, even though she knew he was right. "I cannot afford to be late. This is my first teaching position, and I need to make a good impression." "You cannot make any impression if you and your horse collapse from exhaustion somewhere between here and there. The desert does not care about your schedule, Miss Ellis. It will kill you just as dead whether you have an appointment to keep or not." The bluntness of his words startled her, but she could not argue with the logic. She had been pushing herself and Daisy too hard, driven by anxiety about being late and fear of failure. "You are right, of course. I suppose I got ahead of myself. Most people who end up lost out here do." He set a plate in front of her containing bread, cheese, and some cold beef. "Eat. Then you should rest. You can have my bed and I will sleep in the barn." "I could not possibly take your bed. You can and you will. I have slept in worse places than a clean barn, I assure you." They ate in companionable silence for a while, and Penelope found herself stealing glances at this unexpected cowboy who read Shakespeare and spoke with quiet authority. There was something compelling about him, a self-possession that came from living independently in an unforgiving landscape. He did not seem lonely exactly, but there was a solitary quality to him that made her wonder what his story was. "How long have you been out here alone?" she asked finally. 3 years. I worked on a bigger ranch over near Austin for a while after my father died, saved up enough to buy this place. It is not much, but it is mine. That must be difficult managing everything by yourself," he shrugged. "You get used to it. The work keeps you busy, and the solitude is not so bad once you stop fighting it. Do you not get lonely?" Zachary met her eyes, and she felt something spark in the air between them, an awareness that had not been there a moment before. "Sometimes. But lonely is better than being stuck somewhere you do not belong with people who do not understand you." There was a story there, Penelope sensed, but she did not press. Instead, she finished her meal and allowed him to show her to the bedroom, which was as neat and Spartan as the rest of the house. A large bed dominated the space, covered with a quilt that looked handmade, and there was a washstand with a basin and pitcher in one corner. "There is water if you want to wash up," Zachary said from the doorway. "I will be outside finishing the evening chores. Rest as long as you need." After he left, Penelope did wash up, grateful to remove some of the dust and grime from her skin. She meant to lie down for just a short rest, but exhaustion claimed her almost immediately, and she slept deeply for the first time in days. When she woke, the room was dark except for moonlight streaming through the window. She could hear crickets chirping outside and the occasional sound of an animal moving in the barn. For a moment, she was disoriented, unable to remember where she was. Then it all came back the wrong turn, the lost feeling, the cowboy who had taken her in without question. Penelope got up and padded to the window, looking out at the silver-washed landscape. The desert at night was beautiful in a stark, lonely way. She could see Zachary sitting on the porch, his silhouette outlined against the moonlight. He appeared to be smoking a pipe, the small glow of the ember punctuating the darkness. Unable to sleep now that she had rested, Penelope wrapped herself in the shawl she had brought and went outside. Zachary looked up as she approached but did not seem surprised to see her. "Did I wake you?" "No. I just woke on my own. I am not used to sleeping in the middle of the day." He gestured to the chair beside him, and she sat. The night air was cool and pleasant after the heat of the day, and the stars overhead were more numerous than she had ever seen back east. "I have never seen so many stars," she said softly. "One of the benefits of being in the middle of nowhere, no city lights to wash them out." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and Penelope found herself relaxing in a way she had not in months. There was something peaceful about this place, despite its isolation, or perhaps because of it. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. "You can ask. I cannot promise I will answer. Why did you really leave Missouri? You said something about not belonging, but you do not seem like someone who would run from difficulty." Zachary took a long draw on his pipe before answering. "I was engaged once back home. Nice girl from a good family, everything properly arranged. But the closer we got to the wedding, the more I realized I was doing it because it was expected, not because I wanted to. She was fine, the life would have been fine, but fine is not enough. I wanted something more, something real. So I broke it off 3 weeks before the wedding. That must have caused quite a scandal. You could say that. Her father tried to have me arrested for breach of promise, and when that did not work, he made sure everyone in town knew what a cad I was. My father was furious, said I had disgraced the family name. He died angry at me, and I left Missouri right after the funeral. Came west because I needed to be somewhere where nobody knew me or cared about my broken engagement." Penelope absorbed this, understanding his need for escape more than he probably realized. "I am running too, in a way. Not from a broken engagement, but from expectations. My mother wanted me to marry a banker in Philadelphia, settle down and have babies and host tea parties. It would have been a perfectly respectable life. But you wanted more than respectable. I wanted purpose. I wanted to do something that mattered, to use my education for more than planning dinner parties and managing servants. Teaching seemed like the answer. My mother has not spoken to me since I left." "You regret it?" Penelope considered the question seriously. "No. I miss her sometimes, and I worry that I hurt her. But I do not regret choosing my own path, even if that path did lead me to getting thoroughly lost in the Nevada desert." Zachary laughed, a warm, genuine sound that transformed his serious face. "Well, I am glad you got lost. It has been a long time since I had anyone to talk to about something other than cattle prices and water rights." "How long exactly?" 4 months since anyone has been out this way." The nearest neighbor is 12 miles north, and he is a cantankerous old prospector who mostly just wants to be left alone. 4 months. That is a long time to go without conversation. Like I said, you get used to it, though I will admit, having company is nice. Especially company that does not judge me for reading poetry. Does anyone actually judge you for that? You would be surprised. A lot of the ranch hands I used to work with thought reading anything other than wanted posters was a waste of time. Said it made a man soft. Penelope looked at Zachary's muscled frame and weathered hands. You do not look soft to me. The words came out more flirtatious than she had intended, and she felt heat rise to her cheeks. Zachary noticed. She could tell by the way his expression shifted, becoming more intense. Neither do you, Miss Ellis. It takes strength to leave everything familiar behind and strike out on your own, especially for a woman. Please call me Penelope. Miss Ellis makes me feel like we are in a formal parlor instead of sitting on a porch in the middle of the desert. Penelope, then. And you can call me Zachary. The intimacy of using first names felt significant somehow, like they had crossed an invisible threshold. Penelope was acutely aware of how close he was sitting, close enough that she could smell the tobacco from his pipe mixed with leather and something else, something masculine and appealing that she could not quite name. I should probably let you get some sleep, Zachary said, though he made no move to stand. You still need rest before you travel again. How long do you think I should stay? Before it is safe to leave, I mean. 2 days minimum. 3 would be better. Give both you and your horse time to fully recover. 3 days. The thought should have made her anxious about her schedule, but instead, Penelope felt a flutter of something else entirely. Anticipation, perhaps, or hope. Then I suppose I am at your mercy for the next few days, Zachary. I will try to be a good host. He stood finally, tapping out his pipe against the porch railing. There is still food in the kitchen if you get hungry. Help yourself to anything you need. Thank you for everything. You did not have to take in a lost stranger, but I am very grateful that you did. Out here, we help each other when we can. The desert is hard enough without making it harder by refusing hospitality. He paused, looking down at her with an expression she could not quite read. Besides, I meant what I said. It is nice having someone to talk to. After he left for the barn, Penelope sat alone on the porch for a while longer, thinking about the unexpected turn her journey had taken. She had set out looking for independence and purpose, never imagining she might find something else entirely. It was too soon to name what she felt, this pull toward a man she had only just met, but it was there nonetheless, undeniable and growing stronger with each passing moment. The next morning, Penelope woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. She dressed quickly and went to find Zachary already cooking breakfast, his hair damp like he had washed in the creek. Good morning, he said, looking almost shy in the morning light. I hope I did not wake you. Not at all. Though I feel guilty that you are the one making breakfast when I am the guest. You are welcome to cook tomorrow if you want. I will not stop you. They ate together, and then Zachary showed her around the ranch properly. He had about 50 head of cattle, a few horses, and some chickens that provided eggs. It was not a large operation, but it was clearly well managed. Everything had its place, and despite being the sole caretaker, Zachary seemed to have a system that worked. You sell the cattle locally? Penelope asked as they walked through the pasture. Some. Mostly I drive them to Austin once a year and sell them there. The profit is not huge, but it is enough to live on and slowly improve the place. Another few years and I might be able to hire some help, expand a bit. It must be hard, doing all this work alone. It keeps me busy. That is not a bad thing. He glanced at her. What made you choose teaching? My father was a professor at a small college in Pennsylvania. He died when I was 12, but before that, he used to let me sit in on his classes. I loved watching him teach, seeing how he could make even dry subjects come alive with the right explanation. After he died, my mother remarried quickly, to a man with money but no imagination. I think teaching is my way of holding on to the part of my father that my stepfather could not touch. That sounds like a good reason. What about you? Did you always want to ranch? Zachary was quiet for a moment, watching his cattle graze. I wanted to be a veterinarian, actually. Wanted to help animals travel around to different ranches and farms. But that required money for training that we did not have, and then my father died and left debts, and suddenly becoming a vet seemed like an impossible dream. So I did the next best thing. I work with animals, just in a different way. You could still do it. Study on your own, practice with your own animals. People do not always need formal training to be good at something. Maybe. Though convincing ranchers to trust a self-taught vet might be harder than you think. They spent the rest of the morning working together, Penelope helping where she could despite her lack of experience. Zachary proved to be a patient teacher, showing her how to collect eggs without startling the chickens and how to check the fence line for weak spots. It was hard physical work, different from anything she had done before, but she found herself enjoying it. Around midday, they took a break in the shade of the barn. Zachary had brought out some cold water and leftover bread from breakfast. "You are a quick learner," he said, handing her a cup. "I have always believed that intelligence is not about how much you already know, but about how willing you are to learn new things. Your students in Winnemucca are going to be lucky to have you." The mention of Winnemucca hung in the air between them, a reminder that this was temporary, that she would be leaving in a day or two. Penelope found she did not want to think about leaving. "Tell me about growing up in Missouri," she said, changing the subject. "What was it like?" Zachary leaned back against the barn wall, his expression turning nostalgic. "It was different. Greener, for one thing. We had a small farm, nothing fancy, but my father worked hard to keep it going. My mother taught at the local schoolhouse, and our house was always full of books and conversation. She used to read to me every night, everything from fairy tales to Greek myths to Shakespeare. My father thought it was a waste of time, said I should be learning practical things, but my mother insisted. She said a man without imagination was only half alive. She sounds wonderful. She was. She died when I was 16, consumption. My father never really recovered from losing her. He got harder, more focused on work and money. Started pushing me toward the engagement because he thought it would settle me down, give me respectability. He did not understand that I wanted something different. What did you want?" Zachary looked at her, and the intensity in his gaze made her heart skip. "I wanted what my parents had before she got sick. That connection, that partnership where both people challenged each other to be better. The girl I was engaged to was nice enough, but we did not have that. We barely talked about anything deeper than the weather. It sounds like you made the right choice, even if it was painful. I think I did. Though there are times I wonder what might have happened if I had just gone through with it. Would I have been miserable, or would I have learned to be content with a safe, predictable life? I do not think you are someone who could ever be content with safe and predictable. No. How can you tell? Because you are here, alone in the middle of the Nevada desert, building something from nothing. Safe and predictable would have been staying in Missouri and finding another suitable bride. Instead, you chose the harder path, the one with no guarantees." Zachary smiled, and it lit up his whole face. "You might be right about that. What about you, Penelope? Are you someone who can be content with safe and predictable?" I used to think I could be. But the longer I stayed in Philadelphia, the more I felt like I was suffocating. My mother would have me marry this banker, have children, join the right social clubs, host the right parties. And it all felt so hollow, so meaningless. I kept thinking, is this all there is? Is this what my life will be? So you chose teaching. I chose freedom. Teaching is just the means to that end. It gives me independence, purpose, the ability to support myself without relying on a husband. Not that I am against marriage, she added quickly, not wanting him to think she was some radical suffragette, but I want it to be a choice, not an economic necessity. That makes sense, though I imagine not everyone sees it that way. My mother certainly does not. She thinks I am throwing away my life, that I will end up alone and impoverished because I refuse to be sensible. Maybe she is right, but I would rather take that risk than spend my life wondering what might have been. They worked through the afternoon, the conversation flowing easily between tasks. Penelope learned that Zachary played the harmonica, that his favorite meal was beef stew with dumplings, that he had never been further west than Nevada but dreamed of seeing the ocean someday. He learned that she could speak French, that she had a younger sister who had married a doctor and was perfectly happy in her conventional life, that she was terrified of snakes but fascinated by thunderstorms. As the sun began to set, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson, they found themselves back on the porch. This time, Penelope had cooked dinner, a simple meal of beans and cornbread that Zachary praised effusively despite its plainness. "Tomorrow I should check on the north fence line," Zachary said as they finished eating. "One of the posts has been getting wobbly, and I do not want the cattle wandering off. You are welcome to come along if you want, or you can rest here." "I would like to come, if I would not be in the way." "You would not be in the way at all." That night, Penelope lay in Zachary's bed and thought about how comfortable she had become here in just 2 days. The ranch felt peaceful in a way Philadelphia never had, despite all its culture and sophistication. Or perhaps it was not the ranch at all, but the company. Zachary was unlike any man she had ever met, unpretentious and genuine, comfortable in his own skin in a way that the men of her acquaintance never seemed to be. She found herself thinking about what it would be like to stay, to build a life here in this stark, beautiful landscape with a man who reads Shakespeare and gentled horses with quiet patience. But that was foolishness, she told herself firmly. She had a teaching position waiting in Winnemucca, responsibilities and commitments. She could not just abandon everything because she found a handsome cowboy charming. Even so, sleep was a long time coming. The next day dawned clear and hot. They set out after breakfast, riding together across the desert scrubland. Zachary rode a bay gelding named Rusty, and he kept his pace slow so Daisy could keep up without strain. The landscape stretched out endlessly around them, broken only by scattered sagebrush and the occasional rocky outcropping. "It is strange," Penelope said as they rode. "This place seems so empty at first glance, but the more time I spend here, the more I see. There are lizards on the rocks, birds in the sky, plants growing where you would not expect anything to survive. It is all hidden unless you look carefully. That is the desert. Nothing here is obvious, but everything is fighting to live. You learn to appreciate the small things, the subtle changes. A cactus flowering, a hawk catching a rabbit, the way the light changes color right before sunset. Those are the things that matter out here." They reached the fence line around mid-morning. Sure enough, one of the posts was loose, leaning at an angle that would not hold much longer. Zachary dismounted and began digging around the base, preparing to reset it properly. Penelope watched him work, admiring the efficient way he moved, the strength in his shoulders as he lifted the heavy post. He had removed his hat, and the sun caught the dark highlights in his hair. "Can I help?" she asked. "You could hand me that hammer when I am ready." Otherwise, just keep me company. That helps more than you might think. What do you do when you are out here alone? Do you talk to yourself? He laughed. Sometimes. Mostly I just think, plan things out, solve problems in my head. You get good at keeping yourself entertained. That sounds lonely. It can be. But loneliness is bearable when it is a choice. It is the loneliness that comes from being surrounded by people who do not understand you that really hurts. Penelope understood exactly what he meant. She had felt that way often in Philadelphia, surrounded by people at parties and social gatherings, but feeling utterly alone because no one seemed to care about the things that mattered to her. "How much longer do you think you will stay out here?" she asked. "Do you ever think about going back to civilization?" Zachary paused in his work, wiping sweat from his forehead. "I do not know. Part of me likes the idea of staying here forever, building this place into something substantial. But another part wonders if I am hiding, using the isolation as an excuse not to risk getting hurt again." "I do not think you are hiding. I think you are healing. There is a difference." He looked at her with such warmth in his eyes that it took her breath away. "You are very wise, Penelope Ellis." "Not wise, just observant." They finished the fence repair and headed back to the ranch, stopping by a small creek to water the horses. The creek was little more than a trickle this late in the year, but it was clear and cold, fed by some underground spring. "You ever swim here?" Penelope asked. "Sometimes. In the summer when it is really hot. The water is not deep enough for much actual swimming, but it is good for cooling off." On impulse, Penelope knelt by the creek and splashed some water on her face and neck. It was shockingly cold and wonderfully refreshing. When she looked up, she found Zachary watching her with an expression that made her pulse quicken. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "Nothing. I was just thinking that you look different than when you first arrived, more relaxed, happy even." "I feel happy. This place, your company, it is all very unexpected but very welcome." Zachary dismounted and came to kneel beside her by the creek. They were close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body despite the cool water, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. "I am glad you got lost, Penelope. That probably sounds selfish, but it is true. These last few days have reminded me what it is like to connect with someone, to actually talk and be understood. I did not realize how much I missed that until you knocked on my door." "I am glad I got lost too," she whispered, "though I am not sure what that means for my teaching position in Winnemucca." "You do not have to decide anything right now. You still have another day before you are recovered enough to travel anyway." But they both knew that was not really true. Daisy was already looking much better, and Penelope felt completely rested. She could leave tomorrow if she wanted to. The question was whether she wanted to. That evening, after dinner, Zachary brought out his harmonica and played while they sat on the porch. The music was haunting and beautiful, filling the desert silence with melody. Penelope listened with her eyes closed, letting the music wash over her. When he finished, she opened her eyes to find him watching her again with that same intense expression. "That was beautiful," she said softly. "My mother taught me. She said music was important, that it fed the soul in ways that nothing else could. She was right." They sat in silence for a while, and then Zachary said, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "What would you do if the teaching position did not exist? If you could do anything, be anywhere, what would you choose?" Penelope considered the question carefully. A few days ago, her answer would have been simple. She would choose teaching, independence, a career of her own. But now, sitting here in the moonlight with this unexpected man, her answer was more complicated. "I think I would choose this," she said finally. "Not necessarily this exact place, but this feeling. This sense of peace and possibility. of being with someone who sees me as I really am instead of who they expect me to be. I would choose connection over convention, partnership over propriety, even if it meant giving up the teaching position, even then. Though I would want to teach in some capacity. Maybe not in a formal schoolhouse, but knowledge should be shared, do not you think? It should not be hoarded. Zachary reached over and took her hand, his rough fingers intertwining with her smoother ones. The touch sent electricity up her arm. What if I asked you to stay? Not just for another day, but for longer, maybe permanently. Penelope's heart began to race. Are you asking me that? I know it is sudden. I know we have only known each other a few days, and I know you have responsibilities waiting in Winnemucca. But Penelope, I have never felt this connected to anyone, not even the woman I almost married. These past few days with you have shown me what I was missing, what I have been looking for without knowing it. You are intelligent and brave and beautiful, and I think if you leave tomorrow, I will spend the rest of my life wondering what might have happened if I had been brave enough to ask you to stay. Tears pricked Penelope's eyes. Everything he was saying echoed the feelings she had been trying to suppress, the growing certainty that what they had found together was rare and precious and worth fighting for. I do not know what to say. This is all happening so fast. Then do not say anything yet. Think about it tonight. But know that if you stay, I will do everything in my power to make you happy. We could build something together, here on this ranch. I know it is not Philadelphia or even Winnemucca. I know it is isolated and the work is hard, but it would be ours and we would face it together. What about teaching? I do not want to give that up entirely. Then do not. There are children in Tanapa who need education. The town is small, but it is growing. You could start a school there and I would support you completely. We could make it work, Penelope, if you want to. She looked at their joined hands, then up at his face, seeing hope and fear and longing all mixed together. This man was offering her everything she had not known she wanted, a partnership built on mutual respect and understanding, a life that was unconventional but authentic. Can I ask you something now? She said. Anything. If I say yes, if I agree to stay, are you certain you would not regret it? We barely know each other, Zachary. What if a month from now you realize you made a mistake, that you asked too quickly? I will not. I know myself well enough to be sure of that. When I broke off my engagement, everyone said I was being rash, that I would regret throwing away a good match. But I never did regret it. Not for 1 second, because I knew in my gut it was wrong. This feels right, Penelope. You feel right. Let me think about it tonight, she said finally. This is too important a decision to make lightly. Of course, take all the time you need. But even as she said it, Penelope already knew what her answer would be. She had come west looking for independence and purpose, but she had found something better. She had found partnership, the kind her parents had shared before her father died, the kind she had thought only existed in books and poems. That night, she lay awake for hours, thinking through all the implications of staying. She would need to write to Winnemucca and explain that she could not take the position. She would need to write to her mother, which would likely result in complete estrangement. She would be gambling her future on a man she had known for less than a week, which by any reasonable standard was absolutely insane. But nothing about this felt insane. It felt like the most natural thing in the world, like everything in her life had been leading her to this moment, to this place, to this man. When morning came, Penelope got up early and found Zachary already outside, tending to the horses. He looked like he had not slept much either, and when he saw her coming toward him, his whole body tensed with anticipation. I have an answer, she said without preamble. But first I need you to answer something honestly. Do you love me, or is this just loneliness talking? Because I need to know that this is real, not just convenient. Zachary set down the bucket he had been carrying and came to stand directly in front of her. He took both her hands in his expression more serious than she had ever seen it. "I love you, Penelope Ellis. I know it is fast and probably foolish to be so certain so quickly, but I love you. I love how you see possibility where others see nothing, how you are not afraid to get your hands dirty, how you talk about ideas and dreams instead of gossip and fashion. I love your courage and your kindness, and the way you look at the stars like they are miracles. I loved you the moment you started examining my bookshelf instead of judging me for living alone in the desert. So yes, this is real as anything I have ever felt." Penelope felt tears spill down her cheeks, but they were happy tears, joyful tears. "I love you too. I did not expect to, I was not looking for it, but I do. And yes, I will stay. I will stay and build a life with you and teach the children in Tanapa and help you with this ranch. I will stay because this is where I belong." Zachary pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe, but she did not care. This was what she had been searching for without knowing it, this feeling of coming home. "You are sure?" he murmured into her hair. "You are absolutely certain?" "I am certain, though we should probably get married fairly quickly or people will talk." He pulled back to look at her, his eyes dancing with joy. "How quickly?" "As soon as we can arrange it. I may be choosing an unconventional life, but I would still like to maintain some respectability." Zachary laughed and kissed her, a gentle, sweet kiss that held the promise of many more to come. "We can ride into Tanapa today and arrange everything with the minister. If we are lucky, we could be married by the end of the week. Then let us be lucky." They rode to Tanapa that afternoon, both of them giddy with the sudden change in their circumstances. The town was small, just a scattering of buildings along a dusty main street, but it had the essential elements: a general store, a saloon, a church, and a few other businesses. The minister, a kindly older man named Reverend Thompson, was surprised but pleased by their request. "It is always wonderful to see young people starting their lives together. Do you have family who will want to attend the ceremony?" "No family," Zachary said. "Just us and whatever witnesses we need to make it legal. We can manage that easily enough. How about Saturday afternoon?" "That gives you a few days to prepare and me time to arrange the paperwork." Saturday was 4 days away, which seemed both impossibly distant and alarmingly close. They agreed to the date and then stopped by the general store to purchase a few supplies. The proprietor, a sharp-eyed woman named Mrs. Gardner, looked Penelope over with undisguised curiosity. "So you are the young lady who has caught Zachary Brennan's eye. I must say, I did not think anyone would manage that. He has been resolutely solitary since he arrived in these parts." "I suppose I got lucky," Penelope said, smiling at Zachary. "Or he did," Mrs. Gardner replied with a knowing look. "Are you planning to stay in the area?" "Yes, at the ranch, though I was wondering if there might be any need for a teacher in town. I have experience and credentials from back east." Mrs. Gardner's face lit up. "A teacher? Oh, my dear, you would be an absolute godsend. We have been trying to start a proper school for over a year now, but we have not been able to find anyone qualified who was willing to come out this far. Most of the children are being taught at home by parents who barely have time for it, if they are being educated at all. I would be very interested in discussing the possibility. Come back tomorrow and we will talk properly. I am on the town council, such as it is, and I can introduce you to the other members." "Oh, this is wonderful news." As they rode back to the ranch, Penelope felt a sense of rightness settle over her. Everything was falling into place in a way that seemed almost magical. She would have her teaching, Zachary would have his ranch, and they would have each other. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. Penelope rode back to Tanapa and met with the town council, who were thrilled to have a qualified teacher. They offered her a small salary and the use of an empty building that could be converted into a schoolhouse. She accepted immediately and began making plans for organizing the curriculum and gathering students. Meanwhile, Zachary worked on making the ranch house more suitable for two people. He built a larger wardrobe for Penelope's clothes, installed a better washstand in the bedroom, and even picked some wildflowers to put in a jar on the table. On Friday evening, the day before their wedding, they sat together on the porch as the sun set in a blaze of orange and purple. "Are you nervous?" Zachary asked. "A little. Not about marrying you, but about everything else. I keep thinking about my mother, how angry and disappointed she will be when she gets my letter." Penelope had written to her mother explaining her decision, though she had not yet received a response and did not expect a kind one. She had also written to the school in Winnemucca, apologizing profusely for backing out of the commitment. "She will come around eventually," Zachary said, though he did not sound entirely convinced. "Parents usually do given enough time. Maybe, or maybe she will never forgive me, but I have made my choice and I have to live with the consequences." "You regret it?" "Not for a moment." Zachary kissed her forehead. "Good, because tomorrow you become Penelope Brennan and then you are stuck with me forever. I can think of worse fates." They were married the next afternoon in the small white church in Tanapa. Reverend Thompson performed the ceremony with Mrs. Gardner and her husband serving as witnesses. Penelope wore a simple blue dress that she had brought from Philadelphia, and Zachary wore his best shirt and a borrowed tie. There were no flowers, no elaborate decorations, no crowd of guests, but it was perfect. When Reverend Thompson pronounced them husband and wife, Zachary kissed Penelope with a tenderness that made her eyes tear up. This was real. This was happening. This was the rest of her life beginning. After the ceremony, Mrs. Gardner insisted they come to her house for a celebratory dinner. She had prepared a feast of roast chicken, potatoes, fresh bread, and apple pie. Several other townspeople stopped by to offer congratulations and welcome Penelope to the community. "You have made quite an impression already," one woman said. "Everyone is talking about the new teacher who is going to start the school. My son is 8 and has never had proper lessons. I cannot wait for him to start learning." "I am looking forward to it," Penelope replied honestly. "When do you think we should begin classes?" "As soon as possible." "The children are already behind where they should be. Another month or two of delay could be damaging." Penelope and Mrs. Gardner agreed to meet the following week to begin organizing the school in earnest. They would need desks, books, slates, chalk, and all the other supplies necessary for a proper classroom. It would be a significant undertaking, but Penelope felt energized by the challenge. When they finally returned to the ranch that evening, Penelope was exhausted but happy. Zachary lit a fire in the fireplace, even though the night was not particularly cold, saying it made the house feel more welcoming. "So this is really happening," Penelope said, standing in the middle of the room and looking around at what was now her home. "I am a married woman living on a ranch in Nevada." "Having second thoughts?" Zachary asked, though his tone was teasing. "Not even close, though I will admit it still feels a bit surreal. A week ago I was lost and alone, completely certain my life was going according to plan. Now everything has changed. Changed for the better, I hope, definitely for the better." Zachary came to stand behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "I promise I will do everything I can to make you happy, Penelope. This life will not always be easy, but it will be ours." She leaned back against him, feeling safe and loved in a way she never had before. "That is all I want. A life that belongs to us, not to anyone else's expectations." That night, as they lay together in the bed that was now theirs to share, Penelope thought about the chain of events that had brought her here. If she had not taken that wrong turn, if she had not gotten lost, if she had not knocked on Zachary's door, her life would be completely different. She would be in Winnemucca right now, preparing to start teaching on Monday, living alone in some boarding house, completely unaware that a better future had been waiting just 70 miles in the wrong direction. "What are you thinking about?" Zachary murmured in the darkness. "How grateful I am that I got lost." "Me too." The following weeks were busy ones. Penelope threw herself into preparing the school, working with Mrs. Gardner and the other town council members to convert the empty building into a proper classroom. They painted the walls, built crude desks from scrap lumber, and collected every book they could find. The town rallied around the project, with everyone contributing what they could. Meanwhile, Zachary continued working the ranch, though Penelope helped whenever she could. She learned to ride better, to recognize when a cow was sick, to mend fences and check water levels. The work was hard and sometimes frustrating, but she took pride in learning new skills. In the evenings, they would sit together and talk about their days, sharing small triumphs and minor setbacks. Zachary was teaching himself veterinary medicine from books he had ordered from San Francisco, studying by lamplight after the day's work was done. Penelope helped him practice, quizzing him on anatomy and symptoms. "You really could be a vet," she told him one night as he successfully diagnosed an infection in one of the calves and treated it properly. "You have a natural aptitude for it. Maybe someday. For now, I am content just being able to care for my own animals properly. Though if any of the neighbors need help, I would not mind assisting." Word about Zachary's growing veterinary skills did spread, and within a few months, neighboring ranchers began stopping by to ask his advice. He never charged for his help, but they usually paid him anyway, in money or goods or future favors. It was a good arrangement, and it helped establish both of them more firmly in the community. The school opened in mid-October, with 15 students ranging in age from 6 to 14. Penelope had organized them into groups based on skill level rather than age, which worked well given their varied backgrounds. Some of the older children could barely read, while a few of the younger ones were already quite advanced thanks to educated parents who had made time for lessons at home. Teaching in this small frontier school was vastly different from what she had trained for in Philadelphia, but Penelope loved it. The children were eager to learn, and their parents were deeply grateful. She taught reading, writing, arithmetic, history, geography, and science, often using creative methods because of limited resources. When they did not have enough textbooks, she wrote lessons on the board. When they needed science demonstrations, she used materials from the ranch and desert. One of her students, a bright 10-year-old girl named Clara, showed particular promise. She reminded Penelope of herself at that age, curious about everything, and frustrated by the limitations placed on her because of her gender. "Miss Penelope," Clara said one day after class, "do you think a girl could be a doctor someday? Not just a nurse, but a real doctor?" Penelope thought about how to answer carefully. "I think a determined girl could be anything she wants to be, Clara. It will not be easy, and she will face people who tell her it is impossible. But if she is smart and brave and refuses to give up, she can make it happen. There are already a few female doctors in the country, women who refuse to accept that medicine was only for men." Clara's eyes lit up. "Really? Then maybe I could do it too." "Maybe you could, if you work hard and never stop learning." When Penelope told Zachary about the conversation that evening, he smiled. "You are going to change these children's lives, you know, give them opportunities and ideas they never would have had otherwise." "I hope so." That is what my father did for his students. He opened up worlds for them. As autumn turned to winter, Penelope and Zachary settled into married life. They learned each other's rhythms and habits, their quirks and preferences. Zachary discovered that Penelope sang to herself while she cooked, usually old folk songs her father had taught her. Penelope learned that Zachary talked to the animals, carrying on one-sided conversations that were somehow both amusing and endearing. They had their disagreements, of course. Zachary thought Penelope pushed herself too hard, working long hours at the school and then coming home to help with ranch chores. Penelope thought Zachary was too reluctant to accept help from others, preferring to struggle alone rather than ask for assistance. But they learned to talk through their conflicts, to compromise and understand each other's perspectives. In December, a letter arrived from Penelope's mother. She had been bracing for this, knowing it would not be pleasant. To her surprise, while her mother's tone was certainly cold and disappointed, it was not quite as harsh as she had feared. "I cannot say I understand your choices, Penelope," her mother wrote, "but you are an adult and must live with the consequences of your decisions. Your sister tells me I should be glad you are happy, even if you are living in a manner I consider beneath your station. I suppose she is right, though it pains me to see you throw away the advantages you were given. If you find yourself in need, know that you can write to me, though I cannot promise much assistance given how far you are from civilization. I hope this cowboy you have married treats you well." It was not forgiveness exactly, but it was not complete estrangement either. Penelope took what comfort she could from that. Christmas came, and the community in Tonopah organized a simple celebration at the church. Penelope's students performed a nativity play that she had helped them rehearse, and everyone brought food to share. It was modest compared to the elaborate Christmas parties Penelope had attended in Philadelphia, but it felt more genuine, more meaningful. Zachary gave her a locket he had ordered from San Francisco months ago, before they were even married. Inside were 2 small photographs, one of him and one of her mother that he had managed to obtain through a letter to Penelope's sister. "I know you miss her," he said as Penelope looked at the photos with tears in her eyes. "I thought you might want to carry her with you." "This is the most thoughtful gift anyone has ever given me," Penelope said, kissing him. "Thank you." She had made him a new shirt, painstakingly sewing it by hand over many evenings. The stitching was not perfect, but Zachary declared it the finest shirt he had ever owned and wore it to church every Sunday. As winter deepened, the ranch work became more challenging. Snow was rare in this part of Nevada, but the cold was intense, and keeping the animals fed and watered required constant effort. Penelope helped as much as she could while still maintaining the school, and they hired a local teenager to help with some of the heavier tasks. In February, Penelope realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks but had not said anything, wanting to be certain before she told Zachary. When she finally shared the news one evening, his face went through a remarkable series of emotions: shock, joy, fear, and then pure happiness. "Are you sure?" he asked, gripping her hands. "I am sure. The baby should come sometime in late September or early October. This is wonderful. We are going to be parents. Are you ready for that? Probably not, but I do not think anyone ever really is. We will figure it out together, just like we have figured out everything else." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Penelope found the morning sickness challenging during the school day. She continued teaching through the spring, finally reluctantly agreeing to take a break when she became too uncomfortable to stand for long periods in the summer heat. Mrs. Gardner found a substitute teacher, a young widow who had some education and was grateful for the work. Penelope spent her time preparing for the baby, sewing tiny clothes and organizing the spare room into a nursery with Zachary's help. "What do you want to name them?" Zachary asked one evening as they assembled a cradle he had built. "For a boy, I was thinking Matthew, after my father. For a girl, maybe Rose, though I am open to suggestions." "I like both of those names, though we should probably have a backup or two just in case neither feels right when we meet them." The baby arrived on a warm afternoon in late September, a healthy boy with a strong set of lungs and dark hair like his father. They named him Matthew Zachary Brennan, and Penelope thought her heart might burst from the love she felt holding him for the first time. Zachary was smitten from the first moment, cradling his son with a tenderness that made Penelope fall in love with him all over again. "Hello, Matthew," he whispered. "Welcome to the world." The first months of parenthood were exhausting. Matthew was colicky and did not sleep well, which meant neither did they. The ranch work still needed to be done, and Penelope worried about the school managing without her. But slowly they found their rhythm, learning to work as a team in this new phase of their lives. Mrs. Gardner brought meals. Other women from town stopped by with advice and hand-me-down baby clothes, and the community rallied around them the way frontier communities did. Penelope was deeply grateful for the support, realizing that she had built something precious here. Not just a marriage and a family, but a place where she belonged. When Matthew was 3 months old, Penelope returned to teaching part-time, with Zachary caring for the baby during her school hours. It was an unconventional arrangement that raised some eyebrows, but it worked for them. Zachary proved to be a natural father, patient and attentive, and he often brought Matthew to the school during lunch so Penelope could nurse him. Clara, now 11 and more determined than ever to become a doctor, appointed herself as Matthew's unofficial protector at school. "I need to practice taking care of people if I am going to be a doctor," she explained seriously. "Besides, he is a good baby." The years that followed were full and rich. The ranch prospered as Zachary expanded his herd, and his reputation as a skilled cattleman and amateur veterinarian grew. Penelope's school thrived, eventually adding a second teacher to handle the growing number of students as more families moved to the area. The railroad was pushing further into Nevada, bringing new opportunities and challenges. When Matthew was 2.5, Penelope gave birth to twin girls, Alina and Grace. The twins were easier babies than Matthew had been, or perhaps she and Zachary were just more experienced parents by then. Either way, they managed the chaos of 3 young children with relative grace. Matthew grew into a curious, bookish boy who loved helping his father with the animals and listening to his mother read. Alina was bold and adventurous, always climbing things and exploring. Grace was quieter, more thoughtful, content to sit and observe before acting. Clara did indeed pursue her dream of becoming a doctor. With Penelope's help, she studied intensively and eventually earned a scholarship to a medical school in San Francisco. She wrote to Penelope regularly, sharing her struggles and triumphs, always crediting her former teacher with making it all possible. "I never would have thought I could do this if you had not shown me it was possible," Clara wrote in one letter. "You gave me permission to dream bigger than this town, bigger than what everyone expected of me. Thank you." Penelope kept that letter in her desk drawer, pulling it out whenever she doubted whether her work mattered. She had given up a conventional teaching career for this small frontier school, but the impact she was having felt more significant than anything she could have accomplished in a larger, more established setting. By the time Matthew was 10 and the twins were 7, the ranch had grown significantly. Zachary had hired 2 full-time hands to help with the work, and they had built a larger barn and expanded the house. The original bedroom had become Matthew's room, and they had added 2 more bedrooms, one for the twins and one for themselves. Tanapa had grown too, from a scattered collection of buildings to an actual town with a proper main street, multiple stores, and regular stage service. The railroad had finally arrived, connecting them to the wider world in ways that had not been possible before. But despite the growth and changes, the community retained its close-knit frontier character. One evening, as Penelope and Zachary sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard, she reflected on the improbable journey that had brought her here. "You ever think about what would have happened if I had not gotten lost that day?" she asked. "If I had made it to Winnemucca on schedule?" Zachary pulled her closer, his arm around her shoulders. "Sometimes. I think I would have stayed alone out here, probably for years. Eventually, I might have married someone, but it would have been a marriage of convenience, not love. I would have been content, maybe, but not happy. Not like this. I think I would have been a good teacher in Winnemucca. I would have been independent and self-sufficient, which is what I thought I wanted. But I would have been lonely, and I would not have known what I was missing. This life, this family, it is so much better than anything I imagined for myself. You knocked on my door asking for directions, and I gave you a reason to stay instead." Penelope laughed. "That sounds like the title of a dime novel. Maybe someone should write it. A story about 2 lonely people who found each other in the middle of nowhere. Except we were not nowhere. We were exactly where we needed to be." As the sun set over the desert, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson just as it had on that first evening they had sat on this porch together, Penelope felt a deep sense of contentment. Her life had not turned out anything like she had planned, but it had turned out exactly right. Matthew came running up to the porch, his face flushed with excitement. "Papa, one of the calves is being born. Can I come watch?" Zachary stood, ruffling his son's hair. "If your mother says it is all right." "He can go," Penelope said, "but you stay back and do not get in the way." "I will not, I promise." Matthew raced toward the barn, with Zachary following at a more measured pace. Eleanor and Grace came to sit with Penelope on the porch. Eleanor had scraped her knee and needed it cleaned, while Grace wanted to tell her about a story she was making up. "Once upon a time," Grace began, her voice serious, "there was a princess who did not want to marry a prince. She wanted to have adventures instead." "That sounds like a good story," Penelope said, cleaning Eleanor's knee while listening. "What happened to her?" "She ran away and became a teacher in a magical forest, and she met a kind woodsman, and they fell in love and had 3 children and lived happily ever after." Eleanor rolled her eyes. "That is just Mama and Papa's story with a forest instead of a desert. So, it is a good story." Penelope smiled, hugging both her daughters. "It is a very good story, the best kind of story because it is true." As the years continued to pass, the Brennan family became a cornerstone of the Tanapa community. Zachary's reputation as a skilled rancher and reliable neighbor was well established, and Penelope's school had educated 2 full generations of children by the time Matthew was old enough to help run the ranch himself. When Matthew turned 18, he announced that he wanted to study agriculture at the university in Reno. Both Penelope and Zachary supported his decision, though they would miss his help on the ranch. Eleanor, now 15, had already declared her intention to take over the ranch someday, a plan that delighted Zachary. Grace, more like her mother, wanted to be a teacher. "It is like history repeating itself," Zachary said one night as they discussed their children's futures. "We raise them to be independent and follow their dreams, and they actually do it. Is that not what we wanted?" "It is exactly what we wanted. Though I will admit I will miss Matthew when he goes." "Me too. But he will come back. This place, this family, it is in his bones." He might explore other options, but I think eventually he will come home." Penelope was right. Matthew did go to university, but he returned after graduation with new knowledge about modern ranching techniques and a young wife named Sarah who adapted to ranch life with enthusiasm. Within a few years, they had given Penelope and Zachary their first grandchildren, a pair of boys named James and Daniel, who inherited their grandfather's love of animals and their grandmother's curiosity about the world. Alina took over more and more of the ranch management as Zachary got older, proving herself to be as capable as any man. She eventually married a neighboring rancher's son, and they combined their properties into one of the larger operations in the region. Grace became a teacher as planned, taking over the school in Tonopah when Penelope finally retired at 60. By then, the school had expanded to include 3 teachers and over 50 students, a far cry from the 15 children in that first class all those years ago. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Zachary and Penelope took a trip to San Francisco, something they had talked about for years but never managed to do. They stayed in a fancy hotel, saw the ocean for the first time, and visited Clara, who was now a successful physician with her own practice. "You did this," Clara told Penelope over dinner. "You made me believe I could be more than a rancher's wife or a shopkeeper. You changed my life." "You changed your own life, Clara. I just showed you it was possible." That is what good teachers do. They open doors. On the train ride back to Nevada, Penelope leaned against Zachary's shoulder watching the landscape roll by. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For giving me a reason to stay all those years ago. For building this life with me. For being exactly the partner I needed, even when I did not know I needed one." Zachary kissed the top of her head. "I should be thanking you. You took a chance on a lonely cowboy in the middle of nowhere. You could have kept riding to Winnemucca, but you stayed, and you made my life infinitely better. We made each other's lives better. That is how it works when it is real." They celebrated their 30th anniversary surrounded by children, grandchildren, and what seemed like half the population of Tonopah. The party was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and enough food to feed an army. As Penelope looked around at the gathering, she marveled at how much had grown from that single moment of getting lost and knocking on a stranger's door. There were dark moments too, of course. Zachary's health began to decline in his late 50s, his joints stiffening from years of hard physical labor. Penelope developed problems with her eyes that made reading difficult, which was particularly hard for someone who had spent her life surrounded by books. But they faced these challenges together, adapting and supporting each other through each new difficulty. When Zachary turned 60, Matthew and Alina organized a surprise party that brought together friends from across the region. Former students of Penelope's, now grown with families of their own, came to pay their respects. Neighboring ranchers who had benefited from Zachary's veterinary expertise made speeches about his generosity and skill. It was a testament to the life they had built, the community they had helped create. That night, after everyone had left and the ranch was quiet again, Penelope and Zachary sat in their familiar spots on the porch. The chairs were newer now, more comfortable, but the view was the same, endless desert stretching out under a canopy of stars. "You have any regrets?" Penelope asked. It was a question she had asked before, but the answer always mattered. "Not a single one. You, no. Not even the hard parts, because they led us here. To this porch at this moment with this life behind us and whatever comes next ahead of us." "Exactly." As they sat together in the comfortable silence of long marriage, Penelope thought about the young woman she had been when she first knocked on this door 30 years ago. That woman had been lost in more ways than one, searching for something she could not quite name. She had found it here in this unlikely place with this unexpected man. Their story was not the one she had imagined for herself, but it was better. It was real and earned and built on mutual respect and genuine love. They had created something lasting, not just in their family but in the community around them. The school still thrived, the ranch still prospered, and the children they had raised were making their own marks on the world. By the time Penelope and Zachary reached their 70s, they had retired from most of their responsibilities. Matthew and Alina ran the ranch, Grace ran the school, and they were free to simply enjoy their remaining years together. They spent their days reading, gardening, and playing with their growing number of great-grandchildren. Zachary's health continued to decline, and eventually he needed a cane to walk. His hands, once so strong and capable, were gnarled with arthritis. But his mind remained sharp, and his love for Penelope never wavered. "I am slowing down," he admitted one day, frustrated by his body's limitations. "We both are. That is what happens when you get old, but we are doing it together, which is what matters. I worry about leaving you alone, about what will happen when I am gone. Then you had better stick around as long as possible, but when the time comes, I will be all right. We have 3 children, 8 grandchildren, and 4 great-grandchildren so far. I will not be alone, but I want to be here with you. I know. And you will be, for as long as you can be. That is all either of us can promise." Zachary lived to see his 78th birthday, surrounded by family in the house he had built with his own hands. He died peacefully in his sleep a few months later, with Penelope holding his hand. The funeral was one of the largest Tonopah had ever seen. People came from all over Nevada to pay their respects to the cowboy, who had become a pillar of the community. Penelope stood strong throughout the service, accepting condolences with grace, but that night she allowed herself to break down in the privacy of her bedroom. "I miss you already," she whispered to the empty room, "but thank you for giving me 50 years of happiness. Thank you for taking in a lost woman and showing her what love could be." Penelope lived for another 7 years after Zachary's death. She spent her time writing down family stories for the grandchildren, tending her garden, and continuing to read despite her failing eyesight. She attended every school play, every birth, every celebration, determined to savor every moment she had left. One spring morning, when she was 85 years old, Penelope sat on the porch watching the sunrise. It was the same porch where she and Zachary had spent countless evenings, the same view they had shared for over 50 years. She felt tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion, a bone-deep weariness that told her it was almost time. Grace came out with a cup of tea, now a middle-aged woman with gray in her hair but still recognizably the quiet, thoughtful child she had been. "How are you feeling, Mama?" "Content. Ready." Grace understood what she meant. They had talked about this, about how Penelope was ready to be with Zachary again whenever the time came. "I am not ready to lose you. I know, sweetheart, but I have lived a full, rich life beyond anything I imagined possible. I got lost in the desert once, knocked on a door asking for directions, and found everything I did not know I was looking for. I have no regrets, no unfinished business. I am ready to rest." Penelope died peacefully a few days later in her sleep, just like Zachary had. Her funeral was held at the church in Tonopah, and the whole town turned out to say goodbye to the woman who had educated 2 generations of children and helped build their community from almost nothing. They buried her next to Zachary under a cottonwood tree on the ranch, with a simple headstone that read, "Penelope Brennan, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, teacher." She found her way home. Years later, great-great-grandchildren would play on that same ranch, learning about their ancestors who had built something lasting out of a chance encounter and mutual courage. The story of how Penelope had knocked on Zachary's door asking for directions and found a reason to stay became family legend, told and retold at gatherings and celebrations. The school in Tanapa eventually became a historic landmark, with a plaque commemorating Penelope Ellis Brennan, who had founded it and devoted her life to education. The ranch, still in the family, thrived under the care of descendants who carried on the traditions Zachary and Penelope had established. Their love story, unlikely and unplanned, had created ripples that extended far beyond their own lives. In choosing each other, in building a partnership based on mutual respect and genuine affection, they had created not just a family but a legacy. They had shown their children and grandchildren that true happiness comes not from following the expected path, but from having the courage to choose your own way, even when that means getting lost first. The desert that had seemed so empty and hostile on that day in September 1882, when Penelope first arrived, had become home. The cowboy who could have simply given her directions and sent her on her way had instead offered her something infinitely more valuable: a place to belong, a partnership to cherish, and a love story that would endure for generations. In the end, that is what mattered most. Not the struggles they had faced or the challenges they had overcome, but the simple fact that they had faced them together. Penelope had been looking for independence and purpose when she set out for Winnemucca, but she had found something better in Tanapa. She had found love, community, and a sense of home that went deeper than any place or position could provide. And it all started with a knock on a door and a cowboy who gave her a reason to stay instead of moving on. That single moment of connection, of seeing and being seen, had changed everything. It proved that sometimes the best things in life are the ones we never planned for, the unexpected turns that lead us exactly where we need to be, even when we do not know we need to be there. Their story was over, but the legacy lived on in the children they had raised, the community they had helped build, and the example they had set of what real love and partnership could look like. That was the gift they left behind, and it was more valuable than any amount of money or property could ever be. They had shown that happiness is not found in following the expected path, but in having the courage to write your own story, even when that story begins with getting lost in the desert and ends with finding exactly what you did not know you were looking for.